Yeah, okay, the Gentry Podcast. I know that you will be loving it. We here to break it down so that you start to understand your local government. Who are the leaders? Time to get active, do something about it. Dealing with jobs, the workforce, and affordable housing. Motivate and inspire. Elevate, take it higher. For the next generation, knowledge is power for your community. Giving you the info that you really need. Time to make a change and a difference. Tune in, don't miss it. It's the Gentry. The Jentry Podcast. The Jentry Podcast. Making a change, switching it up.
Hello, and welcome to the Jentry Podcast. Today we have an amazing guest. We have James Albright, who is the City Manager of Acworth, Georgia. But even a step back, this person started his government career at 23 and has been in the same place working hard. That's a true community man. He is a true public servant. And also, he is a leadership blogger. James, we have to get into that soon. But before we do, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Jonathan. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us. I know I said it to you when we were just chatting. I don't see leadership blogger on a lot of the city managers that I work with. So please tell me, what is Leadership in Maine?
Is it Leadership in Maine was a project. I think most of us all aspire to be an author, and we have that book in us that we never write. And it was around 2019, COVID happens. I thought about, well, if I can't write a book, maybe I can write 900 to 1,300 words at a time. I think something that you and I have talked about is we share a passion of how important local government is in this time and place right now. A lot of times people want to talk about the federal and state governments, but the ability at the local level, I firmly believe we have the ability to have the greatest impact on our local communities. So COVID happens. It was when, there were extreme lockdowns. So we were at home working remotely, and I started to just tinker with a website, knowing very little about it. I had a friend that helped me set up the site, and I think my wife had heard me long enough talk about starting to write and just had to plant that flag. So literally went on LinkedIn and some social media things, and I was like, coming January of 2021, Leadership in Maine. And it was like, all right, now it's time. And I think it's been probably about 250 plus weeks of writing on Sunday evenings and posting on Mondays. It's also something that I hope one day that my kids can go back and look at one day and say, hey, that's who my dad was. So that's how Leadership in Maine got started.
That's incredible. Thank you. Talk about an interesting point. We all have that book that we should have written by now, and kids, wife get in the way. Not to any of their fault, but to the excuses that we put in front of ourselves. But you've been out there pounding the pavement consistently. That is incredible. Can you kind of share who is the target audience and what has been the feedback?
Yeah, so great question. Target audience, local government, public servants, public safety, local pastors and communities, small business owners, principals, educators, those type of individuals that serve at the local community level have been really who the target audience is. But it's interesting. It's kind of grown past that. And it's grown into just general people that are looking to grow as leaders. And that's what's been the neatest thing about it. When you see people that, whether it's in this, the state of Georgia locally and Acworth, but then people across the country following the blog it's pretty humbling, and it's been really neat to see.
When I took a look at it, the messages and the insights are good for anybody. Anybody that wants to be a leader or has anybody looking to them for anything. I truly believe what you've been putting out and what I've seen is impactful to anybody, but definitely the public servants. And I don't want to gloss over that. Please tell me how you got your start. You got started pretty young. Did you always know you wanted to get into local government? What was that journey like?
That's a funny question. I actually started here at the city when I was 18.
18?
I'm going to tell this story really short because your time is limited. I had graduated high school, and I grew up here in the Acworth community, born and raised, educated in, played sports in growing up. build a family in. So it's funny, I have a senior that's graduating tomorrow. This is almost now 25 years ago. I'm sitting there in her seat. The week I'm graduating, I get a call from my 11-year-old football coach. They used to coach me in our local youth football program, the Acworth Warriors. And he had heard at that time that I wanted to work with children. The camp secretary for his summer camp at that time, I was graduating with. And I said, well, I'm not overly interested in working with young children, because he was wanting me to become a summer camp counselor for the summer. He was short, and literally camp was starting in 2 weeks. Well, I had taken all of my graduation money, because that's the reason you send invites out, right? Is for people to come out. You want that check in the mail. So I took all the graduation money and I decided to go to a 2-week bartending school. And that's how I was going to put myself through college. And I had told him that I had intended to be a history teacher and coach high school wrestling. That's what I wanted to do. And so I start bartending school the week after high school. Summer camp starts the second week. So I was a summer camp counselor by day and a bartending student by night. Some things had transpired that summer, and that individual ended up passing away a few weeks into summer camp. So myself and some of the counselors, pillar of the community, right? And we're trying to communicate. At that time, we were an extremely small department. When I was with the Parks and Recreation Department at that time, we had 3 full-time and 3 part-time. And when I transitioned out of that position almost 4 years ago, we had 32 full-time employees and 50 seasonal. So at that time, in his position, he was very involved with summer camp, where as I had transitioned out, I just wasn't. The parents knew him, and I had, myself and the counselors were calling parents, letting them know about funeral arrangements and how camp was going to move forward. And the bartending school had told us they had a job placement program, but if we ever didn't show up for our job, and I'm putting this very eloquently, he wasn't so eloquent. He said that if we don't show up for the job, he'll never call us back. So we're sitting around, we're hanging out that evening after we make all these calls, a bunch of counselors just hanging around, a bunch of 16, 17, 18-year-olds just in high school at that point or recently graduated. And I had forgot that I was supposed to be at the Georgia World Congress Center in Atlanta for my first bartending job. Before, cell phone calendars and all that stuff, and completely forgot, called the guy, told him this whole story, and never got a call back. So I had a unique opportunity. At the end of that summer, they needed some help in the maintenance division, cutting grass, cleaning bathrooms, emptying trash, and it worked with my college schedule at Kennesaw State. And as I did that, essentially started working, I think, full-time at that point, and working 40 hours a week, going to school, and just created a passion. It just developed a passion in me for recreation. But I always saw this growing up. My parents are my idols, and I remember sitting at the ballpark on Friday nights, lining football field with my dad. My dad would cut the grass at the ball fields. My mom was the booster club president of my high school wrestling program. My dad would get home early from work, and we'd go to the ballpark and line and drag the fields. It was all always in me. It really brought it out of me serving in that capacity. And man, at 23, I just got an incredible opportunity. They came to me and asked if I would be the director of Parks, Recreation, and Community Resources. I would have never made that decision if I were them. Totally unqualified, but they saw something in me, and I think that is leadership, right? Seeing something in me that I didn't even see in myself. And man, it has just been a blessing to be here. 21 years in that position, and then I've been city manager for about 4 years. So that's how I ended up where I'm at today.
Man, there's a lot to unpack. First, so, I do my research, and I did see it was like 21, 25 years. I was like, no way.
Yeah.
And then I did the math because I saw your age. I was like, wait, no. But Ackworth put out something that said at 23. So I was like, I can go with that.
Oh, yeah.
That at least I can believe and I know.
That's when I became director.
Yes, so crazy for all.
A highly unqualified one at that.
Man, for all our viewers, like our viewers are probably half public servants, and the other half are young people interested and looking to be civically engaged, go for it. This, if anything, James can tell you is go for it, because at 23, he was literally a director in his local government. That is incredible. And then one thing that got me, man, the time that you spend with your family and that recreation, and especially with your father. My dad passed away. It's actually it would have been his birthday today. So
Wow.
I know, and similarly, like he would pick me up we'd go from school to football practice. He would be on the sidelines filming for everybody, and those moments, and wow, you literally took it and made that recreation into such an incredible career. I Over the 21 years, I know it's probably going to be tough to pinpoint. What are some of the initiatives that you've been most proud of when you were director of Parks and Recreation first?
Well, I think in the end, it's how proud I am of our community, our city team, our elected leadership, and what we've accomplished. You have to understand Ackworth. I grew up here, spent most of the late 80s into the 90s. That was my elementary to high school years, graduated high school in 2000. In the mid 90s, Ackworth was in one of its seasons, and it's seen kind of seasons over its history of peaks and valleys. And we were in a valley, and our historic downtown, you could have rolled a bowling ball through town and not hit a vehicle at lunchtime, right? Like it was dead. I lived on the fringe of Ackworth, and we spent most of our time, and that was about the time that malls were getting big and they were kind of pulling business out of the downtowns, and the downtowns were losing their vibrancy, which we're seeing a kind of a resurrection of that now with people wanting to be back into the downtown world. In high school, I wouldn't have thought about taking, my hanging out with my friends or taking a date to downtown Ackworth. It just wasn't something. There wasn't a lot to do other than to play sports and maybe visit the lake. We weren't a desirable place to live, work, and play. And we had some key intersections. We had some very forward thinking public servants that decided to start serving at the elected level, at the staff level. And we got some community buy in, and we started to, as a group, try to move Ackworth forward. And we were a community in the late 90s of maybe around 6 to 7,000 people. We're a community of 24,000 now. We also have the advantages. There's been a significant growth in about a 5 mile radius. So while we're still relatively small from a 24,000 um, resident perspective, I would probably say a couple 100,000 consider us their home, their downtown, like their community. And I do think there's a significant difference in cities and communities. We have jurisdictional boundaries, but communities don't, right? And so I think over those years, we've done a lot of transformational projects. One of the things in Parks and Recreation that jumps out to me is our Horizon Field. It is a baseball field athletic facility for individuals with special needs. And we have this, just finished up a spring season, probably had a little over 200 participants in that program, all the way from the age of 4 to 68 in the program. And the neat thing about this program is it incorporates local high schools, churches, nonprofits that come out and are buddies during those games. That's probably one of the biggest things that I'm most proud of. We've been able to build a veterans memorial that's extremely special to us, a 43,000 square foot community center. I could go on and on about the actual project, but in the end, it's just created a place for people to really be proud of and to want to live, work, and play that just didn't exist prior to the early 2000s.
That's incredible. You've literally been a part of and seen the transition of the community to where it is today. You've seen the growth, but you've also seen those milestones like the New Horizon Field. That sounds incredible. And just the different age groups that you guys are effectuating change for is amazing. And I definitely tip my hat. And I can see the passion when you're speaking, how much it means to you. And I know through you how much it means to the community. And then I thought you brought up a great point of city versus community. I spoke to somebody out in Iron County, Utah, and he was telling me they're a town of 40,000 people, but similarly, everyone in the surrounding area goes to them. Their Walmart in a place in Utah where like Salt Lake City and Provo and large places, their Walmart's number 2 in the state because so many people from the outside of the city limits are part of that community. So it really speaks to that the idea that community is not just city limits. I think that's definitely something that is important to remember, and especially as you're leading. And my question for you is, did you know somewhere along a couple of decades that you wanted to be a city manager? What was that transition like?
Quick thought on the community city thing. I spoke to a group one time and asked them this question. I said, when you when people talk about their city, sometimes it has a negative connotation, when they're trying to express themselves. When was the last time you ever heard somebody talk bad about their community?
I got
Right?
chills. I just got chills. Yeah.
Yeah, like people identify with their community, like they take pride in their community. When you think of city, the word city, sometimes you think jurisdictional boundaries, you think rules, you think regulations, those type of things. But that's why we've always been very particular in how we promote ourselves as a community rather than just a city. So
That's important. Yeah, like I felt that when you said that. So many people when you think of like the city of or the city, but no, what's the community? Like I'm a community person. I want to know the community reminds me of the people, the things that are important to the community. And that's sometimes separate than just the city limits.
sorry, back to the original
No,
question.
no, I'm glad you did because that distinction I'm gonna have to start using that going forward. So explain the city now, explain the community to get back to where we were. Just what was the thought process that led to you now being the city manager?
Yeah, I didn't envision myself ever becoming a city manager. In fact, it was funny. I guess it was during the interview process. One of the council members at that time is one of the, like, it's the craziest story of public service. He served 32 years as a principal and served 28 years on the city council after he retired. So, yeah, long time, like 60 plus years of public service. And to know Butch, so Butch was my elementary school principal and very stoic gentleman, very, I always tell people kind of Abe Lincolnish, like stoic figure, tall, and kind of almost like a grandfather figure to you. And he had asked me in the process that same question. He's like, was this always your dream to become a city manager? And sitting in the interview, you're conflicted because you know what you should say by the textbook, right? But in the end, I had to look at him and say no. And I think for me, at that point in time, my predecessor had served this community and served the community well for 25 years. And in the end, I looked around and I love people. And I felt like at that time I was in a place, in a position to be challenged. And I think we still had a lot of work to do here. And it presented me that opportunity. So, no, I never even dreamt of being a city manager.
I hear so many different answers, and I'm sure I think you said his name was Bush. Probably appreciated that you were
Yeah.
just honest and earnest, and this is an opportunity. And I often say the people that are called to serve and lead, rather than that's the only thing I've ever wanted to do, usually I think make better leaders. So I think that was incredible. You bring up an interesting point in your community. It seems like you yourself said Butch, the city manager, that's long tenures of service. I almost want to ask like why, like or how are some of the questions that are coming up, especially city managers, where the average tenure is about 5 years. So just well, why do you think that is in the community?
A great question because we do have a lot of longevity. This past election, we had two new council members, but had worked with them for the majority of those 25 years. One had served on our lake authority, one had served on the planning and zoning commissions. Even though they're newer to the elected position, they have a lot of longevity in the community. Our mayor uh, has served for 24 years. And We have a couple other councilmen. I believe it's, if I went through off the top of my head, probably 10 years, 16 years, and I believe 26 years. And I think what that does, and you use the word a couple times throughout this, is consistency. I think we are in a profession that you do hear that all the time. The average lifespan is 3 to 5 years, and the world moves fast, and it's really hard to create a vision and implement that vision, to have those dreams and make them a reality in such a small window of time. And I don't know that we talk enough in public service about consistency. Now, consistency leads to sustainability, because everything we do cannot have just a short-term impact. We've got to be thinking long-term. We've got to be thinking well beyond our years and our position. I tell our team a lot, in the world of public service, we're simply stewards of the seat that we hold. Somebody is going to sit in this seat at some point in the future. I am not going to hold this position forever. It's like planting a tree, right? Like, you're creating an opportunity for shade for a generation of people that you may not even ever see. So I think we don't talk about consistency enough, because whatever we do has to be sustainable. But I will tell you, and I think we can all relate to this post-COVID, it does require extreme endurance. Like, it's running that marathon, not the sprint. And we can all get out there and do a little bit of a sprint, whether we're in shape or not, like we used to be. But, running that marathon takes a lot more persistence. It takes a lot more resilience. And I think it requires an extraordinary amount of endurance to do what we do. And I think we're fortunate to be blessed with people like that have that commitment to consistency, that want to see these visions through. But it also takes a lot of community support and trust to keep people in positions for a long period of time to be able to get things done.
That's very true. When you think of mayors being there for, I think you said 25 years. So yeah, like there has to be on the other side of that, people in the community that are very supportive of what's going on. And you eloquently stated something that I always love to tease out is, when you're planning for 20, 30 years out. When you guys, I don't know, or where are you guys at with your strategic planning right now? Have you gone through that cycle pretty soon, or pretty recently? And what are your priorities, and how do they connect to your long-term goals?
Question. In the state of Georgia, we're required to update our comprehensive plan, a more thorough update every 5 years, sorry. And we go through that process. So here's where I feel like we're a little uncommon in the world of government. I think a lot of times we talk strategic plan, and those are a lot of the X's and O's, and it does establish things long term. I think we operate off of vision, and I believe that vision is the ability to see further than others. And I think too often we get so boiled down in the rigid process of a strategic plan where we don't talk about vision enough. And really, where we start our budget process every year as a city is with a visioning session. And I call it like our budget funnel. And we start and we get away for a day, and all of our department heads come in, they celebrate what they accomplished the year before, and they start to establish the vision, not just of the small, minute budget request for that coming year, but what do the next 3 to 5 years look from a needs standpoint? What are some of the projects? What are some of the goals? And they all have freedom to communicate directly with the elected officials. They can ask for whatever they want. They can pitch whatever they want. Now, at the end, as the manager, I have the role of spending the afternoon with council after everybody's presented and say, okay, look, here's what we can realistically fund. You just got, 15 positions, full-time positions asked of you this morning, but here's what I think we can do to move this city forward. And it allows us to dream big and not get so boiled down at the bottom of that funnel, is start thinking up here and then let our budget process work its way down to that based on the vision of where we're going to go. And I think vision is probably where that is our strategic plan. Like, where do we want to go? And for us as a community, you remember how I told you earlier in the process, Acworth kind of had its ups and downs over the years. Like, we don't want any generation to look at it like that again. We want them to say, man, for the last 25, the last 50, the last 75 years, Acworth made decisions that are positioning us in a place for sustainable success.
And I think everything that you say, I believe that the leadership aspect of it, not a strategic plan, that's goals, X's and O's. I'm looking for a vision of where we're going. And I think when you're a good leader and a good steward of both your team, of taxpayer dollars, it's to create that better future and that better vision. Now, I have to challenge you or put you on the spot. When you talk about 25 years from now, what is the vision there? You said success. What does sustainable success look like in 20 to 25 years? Or what would people in the community in 20 to 25 years be saying about Acworth?
For us, it's always success means, and we have people talk about this a lot because I told you about the halo, 24,000. We have our quaint, historic downtown that we have been very intentional about historic preservation, intentional about how we develop that area and maintain that small town feel. But then also being able to go 1 or 2 miles to some of our major corridors and visit every national retailer that you could ever want. That we have quality growth moving forward is that we always feel like everybody's small hometown, quaint feel in our downtown and our core community, but also understanding that in the world of cities, communities, you're either growing or you're dying. There's not really an in between. I like to say a lot of times that when you get complacent, you're coasting. And when you're coasting, you're always going downhill. So, and sometimes people think when you talk about growth that it's just bring in more people, right? But it's that quality growth, making sure that what we're doing now is economically viable in the future, where maybe we scrutinize that proposed development that maybe we need to look at what is it going to be in 20 years? What is it going to be in 30 years? And having that mindset of making sure that whatever we do is just make sure that it's quality, because in the end, we want it sustainable. We want a place where people feel safe with excellent public safety. We want incredible education institutions where young families want to come and grow. We want facilities where you can be cradle to grave, right? Where you can be born here, you can build a career in, you can live in. But then there's those resources for later on in life. So that's been very intentional planning on our end. So I think that's what we say when what's sustainable. We want people to have a good quality of life and be a desirable community.
You took the words right out of my mouth. You spoke about the work, play, live, and that cradle to grave community. That's what I was going to ask, but it seems like you're slowly and thoughtfully building that. And I think going back to the consistency, I don't know who said the phrase, and I wish I could attribute to it. Anything built in a year can die in a year. Anything built in 5 years can, but if you slowly build it over time, that's when it can last for a long time. Like with the community of Acworth, that's what you're doing. Now, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask. Everything can't be sunshines and rainbows and perfect. What are, if any challenges or anything that if you could just snap your fingers and change, it would either make your day easier or the community's vision easier to achieve?
So great question. I think right now, I always tell people post COVID, the pandemic, people have to become the priority. You think from just a market perspective, prior to COVID, people probably needed us as the employer more than we needed them at that time. COVID flips that script, right? And it's just a whole nother dynamic. And my grandfather, who I affectionately refer to as Pawpaw, and I write about him a lot, always told me the hardest thing you'll ever do is manage people. Now, what he didn't tell me, though, was the most rewarding thing that you'll ever do is lead people. And I think constantly working to build culture, because culture is something you're always creating with every decision you make and every decision that you don't make. And the reality is, in public service, we can't do anything without people. Bucket truck's not going to fix that electrical line by itself. That police car isn't going to drive itself. The accounting's not going to get done by itself. Is people have to be the priority of what we do. And we have incredible people here. It's how do you constantly create a place, a culture where people feel like they belong and that they're engaged in the process. It's a passion thing. That is something that is always, as a leader, I think we need to prioritize and we need to focus on. The challenges come when we talk about growth, traffic. How do you make sure that you look at that quality growth? Those are the greatest challenges that we face. Infrastructure. Maybe we do want to grow in certain areas, but like right now, for example, we don't have a water and sewer system, so we're dependent on the county. So is forging those partnerships where we need that infrastructure to grow, but that infrastructure doesn't exist here in certain areas. Those are the challenges that I think that we see from the X's and O's standpoint the most here.
I definitely see those challenges across the nation, that sustainable growth, and how does that affect the people? A lot of people that I've seen that are truly just pushing, bringing in industry, bringing in more affordable housing, and it's a difficult balance. And sometimes even somebody that is truly trying to do a good job and being that good steward that we spoke of, and things could happen like displacement or a congestion, unforeseen congestion, a prolonged construction. So there's a lot of different things that can affect the community, even when you're trying to do the right thing. So that brings up one question to me. How are you voicing changes to the community? How are you getting the word out on initiatives that are doing? What does that feedback look like?
So our strategy, we do a couple of things. So we do town hall meetings twice a year. And we do it a little differently. The mayor will come in and do a presentation, basically celebrating what we've accomplished in the city, what we're working on, what things are to come. But then we create a format where in the back of the room, all the departments have tables, and where the community afterwards can come up and meet with that department head, that they can pick up the phone and call at any time, that they can stop by their office. Again, the beauty of local government, right? Where I think town halls have gotten a negative connotation now, where it's like, kind of like we talked about city versus community, where people show up and maybe there's an individual or two that kicks things off with some negative comments, and then it kind of snowballs there. Where what we find is even when people have their discontent, or maybe they have issues, when they're able to talk to our staff as human beings and be able to hear the reason behind things, and then creates understanding, it's so much more productive than a format where you just kind of voice your concerns. It creates dialogue, and that's what we lack a lot of times in the world of public service, is that ability to just engage with the people that we work for, that we're stewards of their resources, essentially. But social media just continues to be one of our best ways to reach out to our community. We've been very intentional about creating positions. Social media is a full-time plus job. It's a 24/7, but it allows us to tell our story. Because the reality is about our stories as a community, either you're going to tell it or somebody else is going to tell it for you. And sometimes when it's told for you, it's like the telephone game when you played in elementary school, where you turn to the teacher gives you a message, you turn to the person next to you, you tell them the message, and then it goes around the room. And by the time it gets back to you, it's a completely different message. It allows us to be able to celebrate our community and tell our story directly.
I think with social media, well, first, let me touch base. That dialogue that you're talking about in person is so important. I mean, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but you could kind of get caught up when the same voices and the squeaky wheel kind of always gets to oil people that had a negative experience. When you can, especially when you have to talk to the person and you can go back and forth and you can hear their thought process around what they were trying to do, whether they hit the goal or not, it's a little bit harder to then knock them down because they didn't hit the bullseye exactly, when you can kind of hear the thought process and hear what they were trying to do. And that human element is so important. And then on the flip side, I've heard across the board, social media is very important, but on that same note, sometimes that's where negative voices can get amplified, and it's sometimes I've seen in other places where they're playing defense a lot, but it seems like you guys are truly on the offense. And yeah, I'll just say, like, sometimes I can hear some horror stories about Facebook groups just going awry.
You think about it, Jonathan. How many times is just a private individual sitting on social media, and whether you're on your favorite athlete's page or any, and you see the critics on there, you read those comments, and as a reasonable individual, you know that usually that's not the case. And I think too often we look at that and we read those comments and assume that that is the temperature of the public, and that is not always representative of the public. What I like doing is getting out at our farmers market, being able to get out at our special events and like talking to the community. That's where you really get a pulse. We can be survey heavy in government, but if you really want to know and get a feel for your community, go walk your downtown, lunch at one of your restaurants. I love meeting with people over coffee. And, we both use this word dialogue. I don't think it's just an issue in public service. I think it's a human flaw right now is the inability to have dialogue. We are so trained to debate and try to win the argument rather than genuinely sit across from somebody that thinks differently than you. I love sitting across from somebody that thinks differently than me. I may not walk away with my mind changed or I may not feel differently, but that ability to connect with another human and attempt to understand the perspective in which they're coming from. And I've known most of the time where there's been difficult conversations to be had, 99% of the time, they're not as hard as you build them up to be. And once you just sit down and have some good dialogue, it at least starts to move people towards center of things and a little bit better understanding. You may not arrive at a perfect agreement, but you can at least empathize with where the other side of the discussion's coming from.
You're spot on. And I think the reason that you enjoy like the dialogue is one of the reasons I feel like you're a strong leader and you're able to speak to leaders. If you're not trying to learn continuously, and that's when you're having dialogue, whether you agree, they change your mind, they solidify your opinion, you've learned from that dialogue. And I think that if more leaders can continue to always take the time to learn, and as best they can empathize where you can once you understand what that person is trying to say, but at the very least learn something from that conversation. And I think you definitely show your true definition of community, getting out to the farmers market, going to the local restaurants and speaking to people. I think that's what makes a great leader, honestly, is somebody that is willing to reach out. And I have one more question before we wrap up. How are you reaching out to the next generation? I told you 50% of our viewers are young people. And they may not think that they're able to be civically engaged when they're or work for the government at 18. But how are you reaching out to them, or some words of wisdom for our younger viewers?
A great question. So we all reach that point in our life, and there's a really good book by an author named Bob Buford, and it's called Halftime. And I read this, so I am 43 now, and it was about, I think, around 39 or 40 when I read this book. And he talked about that we all experience a halftime in our life. And that halftime is our transition in the first half from success to the second half being more about significance. The first half being, all right, let me get to that position. Let me try to win that award. Let me try to create that project, finish that project. It's all about success at the first half of our worlds. And I think that book was so revealing to me that really I wish more young people could have that halftime sooner in life. I wish I could have had that, right? When it wasn't about me so much. Like that you realize at some point in your journey that this is really about others. It's not about me. That's one thing I always admire about our mayor. You walk out his door and above it, it says it's not about me. It's that reminder. And I think to the young people, I would say the sooner you can get to halftime and realizing that this life and leadership is about significance, it's about others, it's not about us, it's not about success, that can significantly accelerate the growth of a leader.
I loved it. You dropped a couple quotables that when I rewatch this, I'm gonna have to take them down. But I think you saw that big smile on mine. I always have fun creating the titles of these podcasts, and I have a sneaky suspicion halftime might make it into the title. That was just too good. But I really appreciate you speaking to the young people and letting them know and providing the book that at some point it's gonna shift and the significance. And I speak to people in your position and other public service, and a word that comes up is legacy, and what can I leave to the people that are coming after me. You spoke about it as well, and I think that significance is the shift from I, which I get it when you're young, like that is very much a part of you because you want to, like you said, get to that level to we, and the who, I don't even know who it is, but I want to leave what I was given better off for them. So I'm very excited for our viewers to hear and then see what you've been sharing. And on that note, is there anything else that you want to leave us at all?
Thinking what you just said about legacy, I often tell people, usually at the end of a book, you can find what's called an epilogue. And that's really the author's ability to provide a summary of the entire book. And the difference in life and leadership is that the author of our epilogue in life is going to be others. It's going to be the people's lives that we impacted. It's going to be those people that we led. It's going to be our families, our kids. And the question is, what material are we going to provide them with, right? When they write that summary of our world, what is that going to look like?
Incredible. Again, I was thinking myself, it's like, what would people say when it's all said and done? And they're not going to say, oh, you did X, Y, Z. What did you mean to them is more like what they're going to say. Like when I think of my father, what did my father, it wasn't what he did for me. It's what he meant to me and who he was. So I definitely can appreciate that. And I look forward to hopefully my son and the others as well writing my epilogue. But James, man, this has been incredible. Your wisdom and your humility and that servant leadership they pour through, man. And I really appreciate you taking the time to share with me, and more importantly, share with those who hopefully can write a couple lines in your epilogue.
Incredible. So thank you for the work that you're doing too.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And for all our viewers, this has been another episode of the Jentry Podcast. We had James Albright, City Manager of Acworth, Georgia, and that is a community, not a city. Thank you so much.